Welcome to Understanding the Value Added Producer Grant with Stephen Ussery, who is the founder of Stewards Unlimited. Today, he is going to go all through everything that you need to know, all of the basics about understanding and applying for the Value Added Producer Grant, as it is just opening now, and he is an expert in applying for grants for agricultural businesses. But first, just a quick overview of Taste the Local Difference in case you are not super familiar with us. We know local food. So we are a local food marketing agency specializing in effective strategies for agriculture, food, and beverage producers. And we believe in uplifting these purpose-driven and passionate entrepreneurs to tell their stories, find loyal customers, and build successful, well-connected businesses. And these are the same folks that Stewards Unlimited works with. So this was just a perfect match to be able to bring Stephen in to share everything about grant writing, especially since we work with a lot of folks that are writing grants and writing marketing into grants, but we don't specifically do grant writing ourselves. So today I will be the one co-hosting with him, although he is going to be doing most of the actual teaching. But I am Erika Tebbens. I'm the director of impact here at TLD. I myself have over 20 years of experience running businesses of all kinds. I'm an expert on working with entrepreneurs and micro enterprises on their sales and marketing strategies. I happen to be a former farmer and beekeeper myself. I'm a food access advocate and a local food enthusiast. So I am in the perfect place to be helping all of you with all of this, and I absolutely love it. It is my passion. And at the end, I'll be sure to put all of this in the chat as well, so you have it. But certainly, if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out at Erika at localdifference.org or go to localfoodmarketing.com to learn more about us and our marketing services, especially if you are thinking about getting a quote for marketing that either just a quote for marketing for any time or specifically a quote for marketing that you want to attach to a grant application. And with that, I'm going to hit stop share so that Stephen can get his slide deck going.
Right. Be able to, here. Apologies for the delay. All right. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate you taking the time to coordinate this. I'm super excited to be partnering with Taste the Local Difference on this webinar. I've had, I've seen such a tremendous impact from the Value Added Producer Grant in particular. I think it's one of the number one programs for people who are really values driven in their enterprises and want to grow. They've already kind of got their legs under them and maybe they're looking to grow their businesses. And so I'm super excited to be sharing some of our tips and tricks that we've learned. We're going to go over the basic idea of the program and then generally the way that we approach it in ways that I find that a lot of people can be more competitive. And then we'll talk about how marketing is a key piece of most of the grants that we apply for and how you can use that to grow your business. So super excited. I do want to say as a disclaimer, the value added producer grant in 2026 has just come out. And so there are some key differences from past years. The grant overall has been around for like 20 years, right? It's pretty well established. Usually we work on it year round because most years it only changes in very minor ways. This year, we saw them lower the maximum award amount from 250K to 200K. And there also is a new rule about how much you can pay grant writers. So it's a very interesting new thing that I've never seen in any grant program, but I think it's overall good. There's kind of an undercurrent of people who will write a grant for you, but you don't pay unless you win, but then they charge you a really high percentage, kind of like, the ambulance chasers in like law shows, that kind of thing. And so they're trying to get at those particular service providers. But overall, the core of the VAPG has not changed. this is built on best practices. Everything that we go over today will be applicable for this year and likely into the future. So I hope that this will be, even if the value added isn't a great fit for you right now, refer back to this, watch the recording, and we're going to send out the slides as well if you think about applying in the future. So today we're going to cover why this funding is important, overview of the VAPG. We're going to talk about what would usually go into your budget and your work plan. I'll talk a little bit about Stewards Unlimited, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So why is this work important? I personally believe that farmers provide a really valuable social service. I love Wendell Berry, and he has a quote that good farmers who take seriously their duties as stewards of creation and of their land's inheritors contribute to the welfare of society in more ways than society usually acknowledges or even knows. And so, if we want people who value taking care of their animals, their land, their communities more than they do about maximizing their profits, we need to find ways to support people doing agriculture that way. And I think the VAPG is a prime example of how we can support people doing it that way. And specifically, it's one of the best grants for scaling a successful operation. So the two things that the value added producer grant care about are increasing producer revenue and increasing a customer base. Any size organization can apply, but they really do give points for people who are like small family farms, which means that you have under $1 million in revenue annually. Or you can get bonus points if you're a beginning farmer, which means if you've been an owner of a farm operation for under 10 years, and usually they say if you've filed a Schedule F for under 10 years, if you have veteran status, if you're a socially disadvantaged farmer, so either a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business, you can get up to 5 bonus points, which really oftentimes can be a significant boost. I find that a lot of people disqualify themselves from this program unnecessarily. So a lot of times when we hear the word value added product, we think you need to have like a jar of pickles or something like that. But the USDA actually has a pretty broad definition for what a value added product is. There are 5 different categories they use. The 3 that we see the most commonly are people who are undergoing a change in physical state. So think you have a live animal and you're making beef cuts, right? You're selling quarters, halves, wholes. Are produced, marketed, or segregated to enhance value. So think organic certification, naturally grown, things like that, regenerative. And then are aggregated and marketed as a locally produced food. So I would say 99% of the clients that we work with, they can do maybe change in physical state, but they also could do a locally produced food, which just means that if it's sold within 400 miles or within the same state, that can be considered a locally produced food. So even if you are just growing veggies and selling them at your local farmer's market, you can market it as a local veggie and qualify under this program. So most people on this call probably do qualify, even if you're not doing a lot of advanced processing and making some special value-added product. Usually when you're comparing like, is it value added? The idea is, are you receiving more of a premium than a commodity? So if you were to wholesale all of your zucchinis to a wholesaler, can you get a better price by selling them as a local zucchini at your farmer's market? And in most cases, you can. And so similarly, if you're organic or something, are you able to charge a premium for whatever this extra value is? So yeah, I just went into these in more detail, but the change in physical state, usually it has to be irreversible. So something we see a lot is a flower producer who makes a bouquet of flowers. Unfortunately, that's a change in physical state, but it is irreversible. So it has to be something that's irreversible. So an example would be if you took the petals off the flower in order to make something out of the petals, that could be a value added product, right? Because you can't go back. Organic, regenerative, genetically unique varieties. So if you are a rancher and your genetics are something that you've really cultivated over the years, that can be considered your value-added product, even selling a live animal as a value-added product. And then locally produced food is within the same state or 400 miles. So in the grant program, the way it usually works is you're going to propose how are we going to use the grant money over 1 to 3 years. And you say we're going to, we can produce 1,000 1,000 pounds of zucchinis. As long as you are on your farm producing 501 of those pounds of zucchinis, you are eligible. You can still use grant funding to purchase additional inputs for the project. So even if you're growing, we find that a lot of people use this grant to help them expand into a new market before they actually increase their production, because it's kind of a chicken and an egg situation where you don't want to start increasing your production if you don't know that you can sell something, but you don't want to start marketing until you have the availability. So this, as long as you're producing 51%, you're all right. You can't use grant funds to buy land, buildings, or fixed equipment. Pretty much everything is going to be focused on working capital, and we'll be going over examples of what those things are in just a minute. Like I said, you get to design how long you want to use the money, and it's going to be between 1 year and 3 years. And then there is some eligibility questions around who is eligible. Usually, most people are going to be an agricultural producer. So it means that you actually have to produce some kind of a commodity. If you're just a processor that buys ingredients from other people and processes it into a value-added product, you're not eligible. You have to be producing some kind of a commodity that then you're adding value to. Um, Worth mentioning is that harvesters and are also eligible. So think fishermen or timber harvesters are also eligible for the program. This also doesn't have to be all food products. So like I said, flowers are eligible. It can be any kind of agricultural, things like compost can be eligible. There's a pretty wide range of products that you can use. Usually you have about a 30 to 90 days after it's released. We actually work on this year round, like I said. It's been just announced January 15th and it's going to be due April 15th, so about 90 days. Usually it's a pretty heavy lift. Even when we work with people, we still need about 20 hours of time from them. We go through about an 8-week process, and we need 20 hours of their time. And so especially if you're planning to apply on your own, you definitely want to start early in the process so that you're not scrambling at the end. Oftentimes, value-added funding is a one-to-one match. So that means that for every dollar you request in the grant, you have to provide a dollar of value. So there are a couple different types. There's planning grants or working capital grants. We'll go into that a little bit more later. Pretty much, I almost always recommend people do working capital grants, just to get a better return on your investment. And so an example would be if you're doing a working capital grant for $200,000, you have to provide $200,000 of value for the project. And so the whole project would be $400,000 over that 1 to 3 years. And there are a couple different ways that you can provide this value. So that 200K that you're providing, you can either do a cash match, you can do your owner labor contributions, or you can use the value of your raw commodity. For a couple different reasons, we really strongly recommend using cash match for people. One, you get 5 bonus points, which is another significant bump in your score. Second, if you're planning an expansion of an already successful product, usually it's kind of a natural growth, and you're going to be able to cash flow your growth with grant funding naturally, anyways. And so we kind of go through that process with people to make sure that they could actually afford it. You just have to show that you have access to the 200K. And there are a number of different ways you can show that. If you happen to have 200K sitting in a bank account, great, you can use that. But most people show that they have access to a line of credit. They have a bank that says that they would give them a loan. You don't actually ever have to have the loan. You just have to be able to show that you have access to it. Or very commonly, if there's a third party that's willing to say that they would give you access to the funding. So we've had people use their grandmother's IRA accounts and they say, hey, we're willing to give this money towards the project if they need it. And then the way that we design the projects, they never actually need that extra money. And so then you get the bonus points, but you never actually have to use that cash match. So that's a really powerful way to increase your score pretty substantially. And then when you use owner labor or raw commodity inputs, there's a ton of admin work that you have to do in order to track your hours and to track the value of your contributions. You have to fill extra forms. It's just way more work and it's harder, and the return gets lower and lower. So we really strongly recommend that people use the cash match for their applications. Um, we find that the value added will support really big upfront investments as long as you show how eventually it's going to pay off for the business. And so, what we like to do is make a comparison at the beginning and the end of the project of specifically revenue and customer base, because those are the two metrics that they really care about. And any grant you apply to, whatever they ask you to report on, that's the only thing they care about. And so if you have to give numbers, that's really worth saying where you are now and where you're going to be at the end. And as long as both of them grow a little bit, you can be competitive for the application. But we've seen that, you know, especially if you invest in something like marketing throughout the grant program, they can. We've had awards where they're supporting nearly doubling sales volume, right, each year for 3 years. And so they can support really ambitious growth as long as you have it substantiated in some kind of market research or some really like solid marketing plan. So some successful projects to help you increase your revenue include hiring a local organization to process your commodity. So that's a pretty common item that we'll put into grant projects. If you're a rancher, you can pay for all of the processing. You can work with a product development company to create new products. That'd be more of a planning grant, but you can use that for creating new products, or processing your raw commodity into things like yogurt, ice cream, bottled milk if you were a dairy farmer. Some of the ways that you can increase your customer base are contracting an advertising firm is one of the big ones that we see, specifically to help you implement a marketing plan over the 1 to 3 years, or costs that are offset with associated with entering new markets, right? So if you attend a local farmers market or a trade show, or if you want to sell through a new store, there can be the costs associated with that, like registration, labor for somebody to drive there, the mileage, right? All those kinds of costs associated can be included in the project as well. So if that sounds like a good fit, you want to go through this process, we'll go again at the end, but usually we like to tell people early and often to register on same.gov and get a unique entity ID. We find that usually it's helpful to get all of your previous documents and farm records for review. A lot of times you don't want to apply for a grant for something brand new. You want to show how it's a natural extension of something that you're already successful at doing. And so if you already have a business plan, you want to build off your current business plan to show that the grant is just the next step. That's how you'll develop a big picture view of what your scope of work is. You'll figure out who needs to be involved, and then completing the narrative in the business plan, and then you finalize your paperwork. So just hitting on this idea again that simple applications are pretty competitive. You don't need to make a new product. I really recommend that people find something that they're already doing rather than trying to start a new venture. One, like an example is that if you're a beef producer and you already process 100 head a year, and you say, hey, if we start shipping our beef, we could probably sell 150 beef, over next year. So then the grant could cover those extra 50 beef that you're processing and shipping and cover a lot of the costs associated with that expansion, right? And it's going to be a lot easier for you to go from processing 100 to 150 rather than suddenly trying to make beef jerky. And you don't, you're just figuring it out. It's a lot more work for you to figure out a brand new product than it is for you to expand something that you're already successful with. And specifically because a lot of the funding can be used for things like advertising just to a new market. We also find that applications with many little expenses tend to get scored lower because there's more confusion, there's more evaluation on the front end, there's a lot more administration on the back end. Just think that if you get the grant, when you want to get reimbursed for the funding, you have to have a receipt for every item, and you have to put that receipt into a form and explain it. And so then, having 30 receipts each for $5 becomes a much bigger headache than having one receipt from your processor that says we processed 10 cattle. Here's $25,000. So we find that finding something simple with a small number of budget line items, that's a natural extension of what you're already doing, is generally the ethos that we try to focus on.
Could I
Um,
could I
yeah,
ask a quick question that
of course.
just is in alignment with that just came in? Since since you said it can't be used for equipment, but then they're saying if they need the machine to perform the irreversible state transformation, would that be eligible for a grant? And would infrastructure modifications to support this new process be eligible, like electrical work, adding special processing room to existing infrastructure, things like that?
So that would not. You
Okay.
can lease equipment if you need it for your product, but you can't purchase it, and you also cannot lease to own. You can just rent it, and then when the time's done, it goes back. Or you can pay somebody else to process it for you. So none of the funding in the grant can be used to purchase assets, right? So like equipment or do any kind of infrastructure improvement. Good question. Um, So I also think that one of the reasons we point people towards expanding their most successful product is because they have a new scoring criteria that they introduced last year where it gets harder to get them over time. I know people who have gotten 4 value-added producer grants, right? And it used to be that if you had them in the past, it didn't negatively impact you. Now there's a minor point reduction if you've had previous ones. Um, and so nowadays we kind of think about how can you maximize each one because each one you get, it makes it less likely you'll get the other one. And so it makes it less worthwhile to apply and get, a $10,000 grant because that might hurt the odds of you getting the $200,000 grant next year. So now we try to find what are the ways that you could spend the most money in the grant project, really expand your business the most each time. So usually we find that the people who are most competitive for the application and are the best fit are the people who have had natural growth without marketing. It's okay if you've done marketing already, but probably 7 or 8 out of 10 of the people that we work with, they've already like grown naturally, and they just kind of do word of mouth. They haven't done a lot of formal marketing. They're just really good at connecting with their customers directly. They know their stuff. They make a really high quality product, and it speaks for itself. Um, or people who have already kind of hit some of their production limits, so they don't can't produce a whole lot more on their farm, but they still want to expand, but they don't really know how to be sourcing from other people. I really like the value added because I find that a lot of farmers don't ever want to speak to a customer, right? Um, and I like this one because it creates the opportunity for the people who do like engaging with customers to source high quality ingredients from other farmers who are doing it the right way. So it's a lot of times it's like regenerative farmers who then say that people trust me, and I know this other farmer also produces regeneratively, but they don't have quite the same desire to interact with customers. And so I'm going to source from them and pay them a good price for their product because they're not going to get it from the sale barn. But I think it's important that they get a good price for their product. So it helps with that a lot. And then also, this is a really good fit. If you already have a profitable product and you just want to expand generally, having more people um, yeah, purchasing. Um, so if you choose your largest revenue driver, that's usually what is kind of like the idea that we have is some farms will have 20 different products and you can have a grant that has all 20 of them in one application. But usually we say, let's figure out like one or two to focus on. Let's figure out what's driving the most revenue at your business and focus on that rather than focus on adding your 21st product. Let's focus on the really big one. Um, it's likely to grow over the next 3 years anyways. If it's your largest revenue driver, it's probably what's growing the most already. It's the easiest to bring on new people to support growth. We find that the value added is really helpful for people hiring staff for the first time. And it's hard to bring on a staff member to create a new product or do something new that you don't really know what it needs to look like, right? Because you need to be the one to figure that out. But if you have a big product that you can kind of standardize some of the things of your business, it's much easier to bring on somebody new who you can pay to do the fulfillment, do the sales, or do some of the processing. And then the VAPG can offset the cost of the growth that's going to be happening anyways. And so effectively, it can be additional revenue and profit that comes into the business that can then be reinvested into growth. Um, and then this is the idea that it's really helpful for people who are stuck between the amount they can make themselves. So it's if you're already successful and you're like, oh, I could bring on somebody new, but I don't have enough revenue to support a staff member. But if I don't bring on a staff member, I can't really grow. So it's kind of caught in that in between. We really oftentimes see people in that position. And then the value added helps you to bring on staff for the first time. And then it also helps de-risk scaling into a new sales channel. So if you wanted to explore shipping, but you don't know how quickly you could scale, it can help offset some of the costs associated with doing that for the first time and trying out a new farmer's market or shipping or starting a farm store, things like that. The majority of your budget is going to come from five things. So the big spenders that we see, the way that we think about it is if you have that $400,000 budget, the only things that are going to be in that $400,000 budget are things that are eligible. And it's pretty much these five things. So it's like the question to ask is, can I spend $400,000 on these five things over 3 years in order to maximize the budget? Usually I find that if a farm has at least 100K in sales, they can, as long as they're willing to bring on a staff member, invest somewhat in marketing, and do things like that. So that's kind of a nice benchmark for a lot of people. The big spenders are material inputs. So if you are a rancher, you can actually, as long as you're providing 51%, if you want to process 100 head of cattle, as long as you provide 51 fat cattle, you can actually use the grant to buy 49 fat cattle ready to go to the processor. That's a huge budget line item, right? That's why a lot of ranchers like this program. But if you're a CSA producer and you produce um, you know, 4 of the 8 veggies that you put into your CSA, you can actually use the grant funding to purchase additional veggies that you can then put into your CSA box for distribution. Um, you can also pay for post-harvest labor inputs. So it can't be harvesting, it can't be cultivation, nothing growing or production. It has to start at the point of could you sell it? So I like to think of it as like if it's veggies that are in a tote in your cold storage, any labor from that point on can be covered through the grant. So if you are going to then package it into a CSA box, that labor is eligible. Driving it to a farmer's market or packaging it into a box to ship to a consumer, that labor would be eligible. The labor associated with selling it at a farmer's market or at a farm store would be eligible, those kinds of things. If you pay a third party for processing, storage, distribution, or sales, those are the also big ones. So if you're a rancher, paying your processing fees is usually a pretty big cost. Or if you pay a staff member to pack those boxes or use a co-packer for anything like that. If you're paying for cold storage, if you happen to sell in another town and you need to store it there for a time, if you pay a fulfillment center in order to ship out your items, those kinds of things. Or if you pay a commission on sales, if you pay like a website, right, that does some marketing and sales for you, and they take a percentage of your profit, that's considered eligible for the grant reimbursement. Even things like credit card fees are considered eligible because they're a sales fee. Lastly, any fulfillment costs. So we've seen a lot of people use this one to try out shipping. Not applicable for everybody, but for like ranchers is a pretty good fit. So it can pay for your boxes and your postage to do fulfillment, things like that, your box liners or dry ice. And then advertising and marketing is a really big piece. So that can be paid advertising. It can be a marketing manager. So it could be like a staff member, or it could be a firm that comes in and does marketing for you. And so that by itself, I've seen grants that are just marketing. The whole budget is just marketing for a very big push, and those are successful as well. So it's kind of like the question is when you're applying for the grant, what combination of these things, right? Like I really like doing the stuff at the top because you're going to pay for processing and inputs no matter what. And so it's a great way to just kind of um, get some extra money into the business and reduce your need for cash flow. And then based on what market you have available, you can invest in things like marketing in order to really grow and increase your sales. Excuse me, I'm a little bit sick. I visited
Oh no.
nieces and nephews this weekend.
Yeah, this is
Uh,
fascinating. I'm like, there's so much that I'm learning from it that I didn't even realize could be covered. It's like, it's so much broader than I even realized. This is great.
yeah, and I think a lot of this is just like the more you know too, the better you can connect people with it.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I find that there's so much misinformation about it. And the problem is that a lot of times the only advice people receive is from their local rural development office. And some are amazing, right? Like they'll like sit down with you, talk you through, brainstorm, provide a lot of support. And then others have never worked on the program before, so they're reading it for the first time when you reach out to them. Especially with last year, there was a lot of turnover in like government staff, so we lost
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who were really skilled at this program. Um, and so it's really misunderstood, and I think that just that's why I'm so grateful for you hosting that. The more
Yeah.
people know, the better they'll be prepared. But this is usually where we start, right? Like when we're doing the grant with people, we talk about these five things. We write out what are all your expenses. Like you pay this much per box, you need this many boxes per cow, you need, like we frame out and we kind of develop an idea of how much do you think you're going to grow already? How much could you grow if we invested in marketing? And then we frame out how much would you spend in these categories over the next 3 years? And we see, all right, where would we land? Is this a good project? Is this a good fit for the value added? I give a lot more examples here. I probably should have gone through them one by one, but examples of material inputs, right? Or it could be your flowers, plant starch seeds, your cattle. Again, these all have to be at the point of processing. You can't buy a yearling that you then raise on your farm to be fattened, right? You can't buy you can't buy seeds for your crop if you're going to raise the crop. If seeds are what go into the value added product, like a seed mix, then it's eligible, but it can't be something that you're going to use in your production. You can also then use all the materials. So if you're using like jars, stickers, things like that, those are considered inputs as well. Again, no production or harvesting labor, so it can't be cutting or harvesting the zucchini out of the field, but it can be packing into a CSA. It can be transport. It can't be transportation to the processor for some reason, but it can be any transportation after that point. Um, and then something like a sales, marketing, and customer relations manager or staff person. When you're processing, the most common thing we see is people paying third party processing. And also, um, we see that a lot, especially with newer products too. Usually, if you want to start making a value added product, the first step is not for you to buy all the equipment and retrofit your building to make a value added product before you've ever sold that product. Many times, you would want to pay a third party to co-pack it for you in some capacity so that you get a product and you can test it out with your market, see can you actually sell it? Do people actually want it? And then as you have sales, you can justify the expansion of equipment and retrofitting your building. The value added doesn't support those kinds of expenses, but other grants do. But when we work on those other grants, it's a hard sell to say, give us $100,000 so we can buy all this equipment for something that we've never sold before. So usually we recommend trying it out in with a third party first. You can pay for rent as long as it's not a family member. So you can pay for rent for your processing facility, for your storage, for a retail sales location, anything like that, and then the packaging supply. So if you ship it in a box, or if you do wholesale and you need like pallets and plastic wrap, those all could be included as well. Fulfillment costs, a fulfillment center is the simplest, but if you do it yourself, you can do the boxes, coolers, dry ice liners, etc. The shipping fees. And then a fulfillment coordinator is oftentimes something that we see where it's a staff member who manages it all for you. And then advertising and marketing, it can cover things like a website update or management fees for a website. You can pay your farmers market fees, paid advertising, which can include social media ads, SEO ads, email marketing. If you wanted to hire a market advertising agency to work for you, somebody like Taste the Local Difference, all of their fees could be included in the grant. Or marketing staff members. If you wanted to do a training program, your fee to attend that training program could be included. And then software subscriptions. So if you use something like Gray's Cart or Local Line, those fees can be included. Some things that are ineligible are paying yourself or a family member. So your time can be considered your match. Again, we don't usually mess with that. Um, but you can't include a family member's time as match, and you can't pay them with the grant. So that actually can be a pretty big challenge, especially in small areas where your brother owns the processing facility and there's no other processing, right? So a lot of times we can find a workaround, but that's something to be aware of. You can't pay a family member or any of their businesses for time or services. And you can't do anything related to production, so buying feed, putting up fences, paying for labor, and then new structures, buying equipment is not eligible, although you can lease them. So we go ahead.
Could there was a question that came in early on that asked, are food hubs considered groups of independent producers, or would the hub be considered a processor? And I think it kind of aligns a little with what you were just talking about. So it came in more when you were talking about like who is eligible to apply, but um, yeah, do you happen to know?
Yeah, so the you have to be producing the food in order to be, or the commodity in order to be eligible. So it depends a little bit on how the food hub is structured. If it's a nonprofit, it has to be majority owned by producers. And so at least 51% have to be agricultural producers themselves. Or if it's a for-profit, um, I guess it's actually kind of the same. It still needs to be majority owned by agricultural producers. What I would usually recommend, though, is that even I would recommend the individual agricultural producers apply, and then they use the grant to pay the food hub for distribution services, right? So there are a lot of creative ways you can structure the agreements and use money so that you can kind of do what you're already doing, but use the grant to help you scale to a larger level. And I'd be happy to talk more about your particular situation if you'd like to reach out. So usually when we're doing this is how you can make your grant much more competitive, right? A lot of times people, um, uh, you know, there's not a very clear reason why they need the grant. But we find that the best way to make yourself competitive is to look at 3 years of sales data from the last 3 years, right? Your sales volume, your sales revenue, the number of customers you've had, and your product pricing, and then show how those are going to grow over the next 5 years, with modest marketing investment or with whatever your plan is. Like, I've never met a farmer who's there probably are, but almost every farmer I talk with has kind of like an idea of like, here's what I want, here's what I'm wanting to do, here's the next thing. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be marketing. I think that's usually a pretty good piece, but it could just be, we've been talking with this new store owner and we're excited to expand into here, or we want to do this other thing. And so if you do that thing, then the grant helps you pay for it. How are you going to grow over the next 5 years? We find that it's really helpful to work with a business planning organization. We can make some recommendations. We do very basic business planning with the grant, but people who are the most competitive will have kind of a business plan developed with people who really know their stuff. Um, we find also that it's never perfect, right? The next 5 years, nobody really knows, even people who do it all day. And so don't get stressed out about that. Really, it's more about making an educated guess and saying, if things go well, this is kind of how we would expect. And you're really the best person to know that. Um, so if you ever meet with a business planner who like takes it and does it without any input from you, they're not a very good business planner. It really should be a very collaborative, similar to marketing, should be a very collaborative approach. And then as long as you can back up your estimates based on your experience and you can kind of explain why you think it'll grow the way it does, it'll support pretty ambitious growth. So you'd expect you'd those four numbers, the sales volume, revenue, number of customers, and your product pricing, how those things might change over the next 5 years. If you predict your sales, you can then work backwards and predict how many inputs you need, right? So we don't usually start by saying you are producing this much. How much can you produce next year? How much can you produce the following year? We prefer much more of a market pool approach. And so we say, if you were to market, how much could you sell? And then you produce as much as you can and you can purchase the rest. So we work backwards from sales revenue. What volume would you need to hit in order to hit this revenue? Um, and it's always subject to change, right? This is very back of the napkin, but we found that there's a lot of feedback we get from people where it's like, I never would have thought this was possible, right? Without the grant. And it's kind of this process of saying, if we're being ambitious, well, let's shoot for it. And then they end up doing it and usually surpassing what we put together. So it's really like force yourself to kind of think through what you could do, and you might actually attain it. Um, and then usually we use a disclaimer just saying that, hey, one of the most challenging things with business planning is there are so many ways to be more exact, right? Like with our profit, we do a profit and loss with our value added, but in it, we have the price of the product usually staying the same, and we have the price of our inputs staying the same. Whereas everybody knows that next year they're not going to be. But we add a disclaimer. We say, hey, we're projecting that if the price of these things raise, we're also going to increase the price of our end product. We're just trying to show a margin. We're trying to show how the business changes as we grow. We're not trying to necessarily have the exact perfect revenue number each year. And they're very tolerant to that because we're able to tell kind of like what is the more important story. We're not trying to get the exact right number. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Um, to aid in that, we find that creating averages really helps simplify the budgeting process. And so similarly, from a rancher, you might have a steer that you harvest at 1,400 pounds, and they're going to vary, right? They might be 1,200, some might be 1,600, but on average, you could probably say it's going to vary per farm. So this 1,400 isn't standard for everybody, but like you might be able to say on average, ours are around 1,400. And off of that, we get about 400 pounds of meat. We have 20 different cuts that we sell, but using the Cornell Meat Suite calculator, which is an amazing tool, um, on average, we get about $15 per pound. That means on average, our revenue per steer is $6,000. On average, we spend $1,500 to process a 1,400-pound steer. And then when we ship it, we send out about 10 pounds per per shipment. That means that we need about 40 shipments in order to ship a full steer. And then you can kind of move it all backwards, right? So we have our total revenue that we're selling, and we say that means it's this many steers. If we're going to ship 25%, that means we need this many steers being shipped. And if 10 pounds per package, 40 shipments per animal, that means we're shipping this many boxes, right? And that's how you come up with your budget for we're going to spend this much to ship out our steers. And all of that really helps you prevent getting lost in the weeds. I think a lot of people want to be honest, which is really good, but you have to make some educated guesses. And using these kind of like benchmarks and these averages really helps you to be honest without feeling the pressure to be like spending hours and hours to get these really specific numbers. So we figure out what we're going to spend over the next 5 years. We sum it all together, and we see where we are at each year. So then we see how quickly we can maximize the grant request. So in this case, 400K. If you are spending those eligible things and you can spend 400K in 2 years, great. You can have a 2-year grant. Many people need to have a 3-year grant in order to hit the number, but it's better for you to maximize the grant in a 3-year grant than for you to apply for a 1-year grant that's $50,000 because you can't go back and apply for the same product and the same customer base. Otherwise, you can continue to apply for the VAPG program indefinitely, as long as you have either a new product or a new customer base. New customer base being a new demographic or a new geographic area. And so having a smaller number of bigger projects helps you to continue to apply more and more. Um,
I was just gonna,
we,
s- I was
yeah.
just gonna say one thing really quick that you and I were chatting about right before we started, which is that when it's longer, like especially if we use that beef example, or I know we have a fish harvester in common that we know, that, in thinking about, oh, I'm going to scale up and do shipping, right? Maybe they
Mhm.
have drop points, but now they want to ship. That is a lot of, upfront cost on packaging, e-commerce, all of these different marketing things. So it can be a larger chunk that goes to marketing. So like working with TLD in year one to get all those systems set up for you so that you can have greater success and sales systems and marketing systems right out of the gate. And then years 2 and 3 is much more like maintenance, right? So it's like we do
Mhm.
the heavy lift and then we're just helping you maintain it while you focus on what you actually want to be doing, which is not worrying about marketing. It's the stuff that you got into the business to do anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I actually have something very similar, and I'm realizing we're coming up, so I'm gonna start going a lot faster. But um, marketing tips specifically, yes. So the VAPG focused on new customers, right? So either a new geographic location or a new demographic. And applications require like a marketing plan, right? So you have to have some idea of what, if you're doing a market expansion, you either have a business plan or a marketing plan. So you have to have some idea of what are you doing. Um, and the simplest approach we find is usually just to expand your geographic footprint. So you can focus on your current target market and your current demographics, and you can say, hey, we already are successful selling to these people where we are now, wildly successful. We haven't done any marketing and we've been growing. Now we just want to start marketing to people who are a little bit further away, and we're pretty confident that they're going to resonate because all of our current customers do. It's a really easy sell rather than needing to say, here's how we're going to appeal to a brand new type of person. We find that having a professional service, like what you were just saying, is can really improve your score. So you're able to rely on expertise to justify the expansion. They're able to say, kind of like give credence to what you're saying. And then also they bring in new strategies and improve your foundational systems. So it's setting up sometimes that one time thing that even if you're a good marketer and you know basically what you're doing, you probably would be surprised by how streamlined and how much time they can save you by creating things that are like um, set on a good foundation. Um, Usually, though, I recommend actually working with marketers before the grant. So a lot of people will come to us and they want to include marketing in their grant. And so we connect them with people and they go and they get a quote. And a lot of times marketers, and you can correct me too, Erica, but in my experience, I see a lot of times quotes will have kind of like a foundational service and then an ongoing service, kind of like the get your house in order and then helping to run the house. Um, the implementation grants, the working capital ones that we're talking about, pretty much they only want to do the second half. They don't want to do the getting your house in order piece because that's kind of more of a planning type of activity. And so almost always I say, hey, if you like these marketers, don't wait 6 months until you hear if you got the grant to actually do this. Do this. Start working on those pieces now so that by the time you get the grant, you're ready to really hit the ground running with the grant funding and you'll grow a lot faster. And along with that, we see a lot of times people will kind of split that, like you're saying, where it's they'll have those professional services maybe in years 1 and 2, really front loading a lot of that hard work. And then many times they'll onboard some kind of staff marketing support, particularly around things like social media content development, because a third-party marketer who's not on your farm can't take pictures. They can't tell a story about the goat, right? Like they're just things that you as the owner either have to do, or if you had a staff member who's really focused on marketing, they can work with the professionals in order to really maintain some of that foundational work that they do. And then a paid advertising budget equal to approximately 10% of your annual revenue is something that we will oftentimes see and work towards in people's applications. So then that's a flexible, almost like a slush fund of what are the most effective marketing techniques that we're seeing right now, and where can we be putting those. But having 10% set aside each year is what's going to continue allow your business to continue growing. If you don't have a marketing budget, you'll kind of eventually plateau. So you want to make sure that you're profitable enough, your price is high enough, and your costs of production and sales are low enough that you have enough room that 10% of your revenue can be used to reinvest into marketing. Um, those are a lot of big expenses. If you're bringing on Taste the Local Difference and a marketing staff member and 10% of your revenue is going to marketing in year one, you're probably going to have a net loss, right? Because right now, you're not paying for those things. So if you put those in the first year, you'll probably have a loss, but that's actually okay. I find that that's actually a pretty strategic way to show why it's important to invest to have the VAPG. A lot of times we like to show that there is a loss in the first year or two, because then we're saying marketing is a predictable expense in a growing business. The VAPG is a great program that helps you to begin putting marketing into your budget every year. So even if you have a loss in the first year, you as long as by year 3, 4, or 5, you show that you're now turning a profit with this new marketing person and the new fulfillment staff member and a 10% of your budget towards ad revenue, that shows that you have a far, far more capacity in your business because you're far more profitable. You've reached a new scale that helps you to support an ongoing growth. And that is the most competitive like angle or justification of the project that we've ever seen. So that's really where I think marketing shines, is that if you're showing that your business now has extra budget to spend on marketing each year, and by the end you're still more profitable overall, then yeah, we think you'll score very well. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's just it's great to know and it's great to hear. And I do think that, the example of, by year 3 and 4, having, somebody else potentially like in the local community coming in and working like that is one of those things where when you have those solid foundations and those SOPs, those standard operating procedure documents, from people like us, like and you have those things in place, it's so much easier to onboard somebody
Mhm.
locally. You yourself are not trying to explain it all or get them up to speed, right? You have really rock solid marketing foundations and a brand and everything in place so that person can just get up to speed and get going with you. It's just, yeah, it makes a world of difference. And I would agree, like having prioritizing ongoing marketing budget really does it does make a difference. Absolutely.
I love the SOP stuff too. That kind of is what I was saying earlier around if you focus on expanding your most profitable or your biggest revenue driver, right? It's like easier to standardize. So if you've worked with a professional that helps you standardize what your marketing approach is, there's less variation, right? It's way easier to bring on new people.
Yeah. And I will just say too, very briefly, we do have somebody actually how we connected one of our clients, a repeat client who works with you and with us, who has done what you recommended in the while she's waiting on different grants, to hear back, already started working with us. And I know it's made a huge, huge difference. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, sam.gov, UEI number, go look at them right now. There also are a number of free resources to help you apply. Your rural development office, this is a hyperlink. So if you'll get the slides after this, you can feel free to click on this or you can Google it. They provide like support for the VAPG pretty loosely. Usually they'll like talk through an idea, help you make sure you're eligible. Um, it can depend a little bit on your local office, but we always reach out and go through our project with the rural development office, like after we have a work plan done and say, hey, do you understand this? Any questions? Because they also are the first one to say, were you eligible or not? And they're the ones who are like, check the box, right? So you definitely always want to be in contact with them. Things like your Small Business Development Center or SCORE can be helpful for business planning. There are some nonprofits like if you're in Kentucky, go reach out to K Card. They will write the VAPG for you. So there are some places like that. There also are a number of paid resources. Specifically, I want to give a plug to Taste the Local Difference. Really impressed with their marketing. Um, I think it's like we said, it's setting you on a foundation rather than there are some marketers who you can tell it's just like they want to get you on and then you'll never leave, but it seems like they are really building your capacity, right? And they're flexible to see how much do you want to do, what do you want to be able to hand off, and then filling that need well. So I really highly recommend them. Stewards Unlimited, also, I'll give you a brief plug. We help identify, evaluate, design, and win funding. So we've done a lot of value addeds. We've applied for over 40, have a greater than 80% success rate. We really probably should have led with that, but we like the program a lot. We're really comfortable with it. We've worked with a lot of different farms, over 100 in 31 plus states, majority being like regenerative, organic, direct to consumer style organizations apply for a huge variety of different types of grants. The biggest thing that I would like to plug is that we have a free grant alert system. So if you click on this link, or we'll send you a link in the follow-up email, if you choose tags that are relevant for your business, we send out grant alerts every week. Sometimes we send out 10 to 15 in a week. You wouldn't get all those that are kind of across the US, but you'd say, hey, I'm in Michigan and I'm a BIPOC producer that has a market garden and I've been farming for under 10 years. And then we'd send you Michigan opportunities, BIPOC opportunities, market garden opportunities, and things that are relevant for you. And then if any of them sound interesting, we provide free consultations where we could then talk through the opportunity, make sure you'd be competitive. And then if you are, we operate on a flat fee-based service fee. So if there's ever a grant that you wanted to apply for, we look at how prepared you are, how complex the opportunity is, and then we give you a flat rate quote. We never take a percentage of an award. We find that unethical. And so it's always kind of understood upfront, and then we do usually monthly payments to make it easier. Um, but thank you so much for your time today. You've already done like the first step. I think the value added is pretty overwhelming for a lot of people. So going and looking for new information is the first step. I would love to talk with anybody about your specific opportunity. We'll have some time for questions. Um, but yeah, please reach out. I would love to chat more.
Yeah, thank you so, so much. And I will just say I get the grant alerts and it's really helpful. We've, learned about a lot of great ones that then we try to, send out in different like newsletters or different things that we have, or I'll just like forward them to different partners of ours. And it's so great. It's like just such an amazing resource that you put together. So I definitely encourage people to check that out for themselves. And thank you again. This was, like I said earlier, I learned so much. I really was under the impression that it was like, you're gonna make salsa or whatever. Like I had no idea it included so much. So that's wonderful. One question that came through earlier on was someone had said that they heard that the disadvantaged category, like woman owned, is not considered as a beneficial factor anymore on other applications, but the value added producer grant is still considering that as like one of their criteria for extra scoring. It sounds like that hasn't been eliminated.
Yeah, it's still here for this year. So I guess we
Okay.
could see kind of if that changes in the future. And I have heard that in other grant programs, there's at least been the thought to change it. I haven't seen too many programs where it used to be and now isn't. But it's good to see that it's still there for this one.
Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I don't see any other questions typed in the chat. But as Stephen already said, we will be sending this out before the end of the week with the slides and some links and different things. If you are watching this after the fact on a replay, certainly all the contact info is here. You can reach out to Stephen, and he and his team, I know, are happy to help. And if you have questions about anything with, marketing related, you can always reach out on localfoodmarketing.com. There is always a form you can put in your info. It's the marketing inquiry form. And when you fill that out, a member of our team will be in touch. We'll schedule some time with you, and then we can figure out your needs, your goals, and put together a proposal for you. There's never any cost associated with that. We're just happy to do it because we know, like Stephen said, it strengthens a grant application, any grant application, to have a very specific marketing plan instead of a vague marketing line item, right? To have that specific proposal is great, and especially in the food and ag world, when it's a food and ag world grant, showing that the your marketing partner is Taste the Local Difference adds a lot of credence to it as well. So yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you, Stephen, so much. This was really helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thanks to Erica for hosting.
Yeah, yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.